Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, January 13th, 2022. Well, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. I thought I'd start with a quotation from St. Anthony the Great, one of the Desert Fathers. You may have heard this already. It's become rather popular in the last few years. A time is coming when men will go mad, and when they see someone who is not mad, they will attack him, saying, "You are mad. You are not like us." I see, according to several reports, that a concrete wall is being built around the White House. Uh, Apparently, this is not a story which particularly interests the regime media. I wonder why that might be. I was listening to in the chat yesterday about COVID fatigue, and I explained my rationale for spending so much time on it. But I feel your pain, as Bill Clinton once said. So, in recognition of that, tomorrow is going to be COVID free Friday. There will be no stories about COVID tomorrow unless something extraordinary happens. I have to admit that doing so much about COVID, there's so many things which are pretty much updating from the same sources. So it's become something of a crutch for me. But again, nonetheless, tomorrow will be COVID free Friday. This is from Pete Williams at NBC News. The Supreme Court Thursday blocked the Biden administration's rule requiring larger businesses to ensure that workers are vaccinated against COVID-19 or wear masks and get tested weekly. But the court said a separate mandate requiring vaccinations for an estimated 20 million healthcare workers can be enforced. So there's supposed to be about 330 million people in the United States. I suspect that number is rather higher. But 20 million healthcare workers. Well, that will give you some idea of why the United States spends significantly more, on healthcare than any other country on earth. The workplace rule, which the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, announced last fall, required companies with 100 or more employees to ensure that their workers either get vaccinated or wear masks and show negative COVID test results at least once a week. OSHA estimated that the rule, which would have covered nearly 80 million U.S. workers, would save over 6,500 lives and prevent 250,000 hospitalizations in the next 6 months. Golly, I wonder which models they were working from. The court's conservative majority said the administration had gone too far in imposing such a sweeping requirement on the nation's businesses. Quote, although Congress has indisputably given OSHA the power to regulate occupational dangers, it has not given the agency the power to regulate public health more broadly. Requiring the vaccination of 84 million Americans selected simply because they work for employers with more than 100 employees certainly falls in the latter category, unquote. The three liberal justices said in their dissent that OSHA was well within its authority and expertise to impose the mandate. Quote, in the face of a still raging pandemic, this court tells the agency charged with protecting worker safety that it may not do so in all the workplaces needed. As disease and death continue to mount, this court tells the agency that it cannot respond in the most effective way possible. Without legal basis, the court usurps a decision that rightfully belongs to others. It undercuts the capacity of the responsible federal officials acting well within the scope of their authority to protect American workers from grave danger, unquote. President Biden responded, I'm disappointed that the Supreme Court has chosen to block common sense life-saving requirements for employees at large businesses that were grounded squarely in both science and the law. We have to keep working together if we want to save lives, keep people working, and put this pandemic behind us. So, what is the reaction to this? Well, I suppose it breaks down pretty conveniently on right versus left. But a lot of people on the right are not happy with a particularly so-called conservative judge. Ace of Spades writes, even though it is now a well-known fact that hospitals are calling in COVID-infected doctors and nurses into work, and therefore there can be no rational basis for depriving anyone of the right to refuse a vaccine, the conservative justices picked for us by the neoliberal Federalist Society did what they always do and sided with the liberals because they are liberals. Kurt Schlichter tweeted, no more Federalist Society judges. I want conservatives who will vote conservative every single time. Ron Klain retweeted Stephanie Rule, commenting on the fact that Biden's OSHA mandate was a workaround, meaning a way to get around the pesky little fact that Biden was doing something that Congress had not authorized and therefore was without legitimacy and was an illegal presidential action. And here's a story by Kip Jones at Mediaite. Conservatives are ripping Supreme Court Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh online after he sided with the court's liberal wing to save President Joe Biden's vaccine mandate for healthcare workers Thursday. Conservatives who had hoped to see understaffed and overworked healthcare workers unburdened by a similar mandate were angry when Kavanaugh sided with Chief Justice John Roberts and the court's liberals to save a mandate for medical facilities which accept Medicare or Medicare payments. That the mandate was scrapped in a 5-4 decision. Kavanaugh was dragged on Twitter and nothing was off the table. Many wondered if the conservative movement had made a mistake when it went to bat for the jurist who was accused of groping Christine Blasey Ford while he was in high school, an accusation that defined his confirmation. Kyle Becker tweeted, Kavanaugh's selection earns a facepalm for the Trump administration. You would think that after leftists smeared his reputation with false rape allegations, he wouldn't give them the time of day. Thank the turtle in charge of the Senate for his nomination. Radio host Bill Spadia commented, given Kavanaugh's sellout of medical workers today, many will revisit fighting so hard to protect him from leftist wolves willing to lie to take him down. Roberts is an establishment hack, so no surprise there. Ashley Sinclair tweeted, Brett Kavanaugh is useless. Errol Weber tweeted, Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts just sided with Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan to force 17 million healthcare workers to get the COVID vaccine. Never call those men conservatives again. We have to fight until every American citizen is free from this mandate. Oh, there's a simpler thing to do. Stop calling yourself conservatives and completely disassociate yourself from the rotting corpse of the conservative movement. Jesse Kelly tweeted, I despise Brett Kavanaugh. We should have left him for the wolves. Freaking loser. Michael Rufo tweeted, Kavanaugh's new name is Kakanaugh. He's no friend of small government or conservatives, nationalized industry, and centrally planned health care. And, oh, yes. You know who is really unhappy with Donald Trump these days? Why, that would be Ann Coulter. And as I've been saying for quite some time, Ann Coulter's, she acts towards Trump as a spurned lover. It is also very personal, visceral, one might say. After the story where Trump appears to call Governor Ron DeSantis gutless for refusing to declare whether he has got the booster, Coulter tweeted, mean girl attacks someone prettier. In case that was too obscure, she followed up, exclusive, Trump is demanding to know Ron DeSantis's booster status, and I can now reveal it. He was a loyal booster when Trump ran in 2016, but then he learned our president was a liar and con man whose grift was permanent. I hope that clears things up. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Anrun, Zen Master Football Analysis, Dan William Hicks, respectable commenting name, Popcasso88, Vistula Viper, that is a new name to me. Hello to you. Hello to Caligula138. Hello to Anrun, who says, yes, Kavanaugh went along on that second one. MOPS cafeteria at hospital equals healthcare worker, says Chogokin666. Yes, I suppose there are an awful lot of ancillary employees. Hello to Red Sulphur Cafe. Justin Proto, who asks, bets on court packing? Well, even FDR backed down from that. But that was only after he'd given the Supreme Court justices a terrible scare. They were routinely striking down his New Deal constructions as unconstitutional because they were and are. But after the talk of court packing became current, the Supreme Court decided that, well, okay, if FDR wants to create all these unconstitutional agencies, who are we to stand in his way? Chogokin666 says, if the media hadn't told you there was a pandemic, you would have no idea there was one. Yes, that's what that Israeli professor, what was his name, Ehud Kimron, said. No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania says, the common sense gun/immigration policy modifier strikes again. Hello to Don Willis, who says, Scottish curb stomping OSHA. I'll take the win for freedom. Red Sulphur Cafe is getting ready for a dinner. Vistula Viper says, Kavanaugh Roberts, so conservative, the New Yorker will be running puff pieces about them soon. Yes, it's an example of, especially with Kavanaugh, an example of what Tom Bethel and Joe Sobran once dubbed strange new respect. Metal Mike, hello, says, yeah, but Kavanaugh likes beer. Oh, he likes baseball, too. So we can't be all that bad, says Metal Mike. Halper, hello, says, say it loud, I'm reactionary and proud. Hello to Dionysus. Hello to Lamprey Milt. Didn't Bush vouch for Kavanaugh? Should have been a warning sign, says Metal Mike. British American, hello, says, someone needs to market a KMG pull-string doll with certain beloved catchphrases like white people, boo! I'm not making this up, ho-ho, very satirical, all uttered with sirens in the background. Hello to Polygons, who says, I don't really care about the details. I see liberals crying and I smile. It's a win for sanity either way. What are we talking about? Little Kim, Eva, or Pink? What? Huh? Is Don Willis? I don't get that. David the Gnome says, hello. Well, and I say hello back. I was talking to my dad who lives in D.C., and he had no idea that they'd put up a cement wall in front of the White House. David the Gnome says, I think the lack of reporting on it was even more shocking to him than the wall itself. Well, I think the first person who put up video got what are your sources? Where are your sources? Oh, yeah, this is my source. Okay, I was there and I saw it and I recorded it. Are you a member of the regime media? No. Well, then I'm afraid you can't be trusted. Hello to Mr. Chuck the Buck Norris, who says Joseph Cocteau can't stand anti-vaccine fanatics, LOL. I'm not an anti-vaccine fanatic myself, but of course the CDC, or was it the FDA? The FDA actually had to officially change their definition of what a vaccine is. Hello to Seraphim Goose. Quachulango, hello, says the baseball crank is from French level bad. No Sleep says Thomas is the guy everyone should look at if the nation collapses, and he should tell them, I told you so in return. Hello to Professor Paul, Kakwa Pajavaitye. Michael Mike says Kieran Moore is now being attacked for not making vaccines mandatory for kids. Well, I don't know. The European Union has backed off on the boosters. You know, imagine if Trump had nominated 3 Clarence Thomases instead of Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and the others as polygons. There's a problem here. Okay, there's a big problem. As I like to say, they all go to the same schools and they all learn the same things. So there's a certain degree of crypsis in a lot of these people. Oh, well, he's really our guy. Well, how would you know he's really our guy? When you get up to the Supreme Court level, the stakes are raised considerably, obviously. Also, people know where you live. And it sounds petty, but you're not getting invited to, the proper cocktail parties anymore. People are shunning you. Restaurants decide they're going to turn you away, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of people. I mean, Clarence Thomas can certainly take it, but there's a few men. There's a few men as tough as he is. KMG, as I do, believes if you want the vax, good for you. I'll pass. Thanks, says Chogokin 666. Not for children. Not for children. How many years you think we have before total collapse? Asked Dionysus. I don't make those kind of predictions. Yay, Gottfried is why I tune in. I guess that's the Cocteau show, says David the Gnome. Hello to Rustin Shackelford, who says Ford was right after all. Had hard pass on this vax, says Metal Mike. Thomas is a great, great American, says Justin Proto. Hello to Jim Smith. Contracu, hello, says Cocteau imagines himself a part of the establishment as if one day it will come to its senses and anoint him the new William F. Buckley. Well, if you read Buckley in the 1950s or even in the 1960s, and then you read, it's just he is a child of the zeitgeist. I mean, we're all children of the zeitgeist with few exceptions, but he was so much so that he ended up supporting the invasion of Iraq after he was publicly humiliated by Norman Podhoretz. I mean, the neocons were interlopers into the conservative movement, and Buckley was pleased as punch that they were coming along. He didn't understand that their agenda was to simply take it over and make it their thing, pure and simple. And let's get hello to Tom Anderson. The Zen Master says this recent aggressive uptick regarding the unvaxxed is because of the frequency of side effects is increasing and they are running out of time. Perhaps. These are heady times for would-be little Hitlers or would-be little Lenins. This is from Lars Larson at FM News 101 at KXL Radio. Northwest governments have done plenty of scary things over the nearly 2 years since COVID first arrived from China. Few are as terrifying as the Washington State Board of Health planning to add COVID to the list of diseases for which it has authority to order law enforcement to forcibly detain and quarantine people. It plans a public hearing this Friday. If approved, Washington Administrative Code 246-100 local health officers at his or her sole discretion to issue an emergency detention order causing a person or group of persons to be immediately detained for purposes of isolation or quarantine, unquote. This is not a piece of legislation. If it were, your elected representatives would get a vote. The State Board of Health has 10 members. 9 are appointed by Governor Jay Inslee. This means voters can't take action against the board if it grants this draconian authority. But I found that public pressure works wonders when a government agency gets enough blowback to a crazy idea like giving bureaucrats the authority to send the sheriff or police out to arrest you, quarantine you against your will. Well, what do we have in Washington State? We have King County and the rest of it. And the rest of it, particularly the eastern part of Washington, is very, very different than the coastal part of Washington. Very, very difficult indeed. But of course, these counties, these blue counties like King County, have metastasized to the extent now that it's like Multnomah County in Oregon, that they just dominate the state. It's as if the people outside King County and Multnomah counties hardly exist in Washington and Oregon. And federal government now says all truckers crossing border must be fully vaccinated. Let's have a supply crisis in Canada, because why not? Why not, huh? I mean, that'd be great fun. Great fun. And the latest from Ontario, from Chris Herholt at CP24. Ontario reports 35 new COVID-19 deaths, hospitals caring for record number of patients. And they go back and forth at CP24 about whether they're going to give us the breakdown of the data of new cases. And today, no. Nope. We're not getting those. No, wait. Of those who qualified for PCR testing. Oh, okay. They've hidden it under there. Of the new cases, 303 involved partially vaccinated people, 517. Their status was not known. 1,336 involved unvaccinated people, and 7,753 were fully vaccinated. Ontario says 164,000 additional COVID-19 vaccine doses were administered on Wednesday. Of those, 11,839 were first doses, 11,195 were second doses, and 140,840 were third doses. Across all age groups, 83.5% of residents have at least one dose, 75% have two doses, and 35% have three doses. This is among all age groups, including 0 to 4 and 5 to 12. Ontario has really gone all in on the so-called booster. And wait, there's more. This is from Chris Fox at CP24. Ontario is making immunocompromised individuals eligible to receive a fourth dose of COVID-19 vaccine after previously doing the same for residents of long-term care homes and other congregate care settings. Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, made the announcement during a briefing Thursday afternoon. Immunocompromised individuals include organ transplant recipients, anyone undergoing chemotherapy, and anyone who is taking immune-suppressing medication, among other groups. Yeah, I would have to think that pretty much anyone in an ICU is immunosuppressed. But it's just for the special people. How long before you're not fully vaccinated until you get 4 doses? And, oh, yes. Professor Paul knows all about this. A young fellow in the old Soviet Union named Pavel Morozov. He was nicknamed Pavlik, and he became a great hero of the Soviet Union because he ratted on his parents. Now, there seems to be considerable question as to how true any of this is. What is true? Supposedly his parents killed him after he ratted them out. Now, what we do know for a fact is that there was a cult of Pavlik Morozov, a young pioneer, supposedly. I'm looking at a picture of him in Wikipedia, and this is obviously, the photograph is obviously not a photograph, or it's not a photograph of a real person. No one has a forehead that big, to give one example. Why do I mention Pavlik Morozov? Well, for this reason. This is from Lisa Belmont, or Belmonte, at Nar City. Justin Trudeau told kids to ask their parents if they can go get vaccinated. Yes, let's just go over the heads of parents, because what kind of autonomy do they have anyway? Now that a COVID-19 vaccine is available for children 5 and over, Justin Trudeau is trying to get doses into the arms of more of the younger population. And he told kids to ask their parents if they can go get vaccinated. During a COVID-19 update, January 12th, the Prime Minister took a moment to speak directly to kids about what they've been going through recently and even throughout the entire pandemic. I know many of you are in virtual school again. Many of you had made more sacrifices, Trudeau said. This is not easy. He mentioned that almost half of the eligible kids between the ages of 5 and 12 in Canada have gotten their first dose of a vaccine, but that number could be higher. We need to get more. So please ask your parents if you can get vaccinated. We know kids all across this country, you've been doing the right things over these past long years, and it sucks, but you've been amazing, and we need to keep doing everything we can get to get through this. Unquote. That's a direct quotation. And it sucks. Yes. After the Pfizer vaccine was approved for children 5 to 11, Trudeau took his 7-year-old to get a first dose and asked other parents to do the same with theirs. The best thing we can do for ourselves, our kids, and all of our loved ones is to get vaccinated. Yes. Got to eliminate the control group, because the existence of a control group is becoming unbearably embarrassing for the regime. More news from Soviet Kanakistan, as someone dubbed it some years ago. This is from Jordan Boyd at The Federalist. Ronald McDonald houses in British Columbia and Yukon plan to evict child cancer patients and their parents if they don't get the COVID-19 shot by the end of January. Beginning January 17th, everyone 5 years and older who are working, staying, or visiting our facilities must show proof of full vaccination, 2 doses, in addition to completing our existing screening, unless an accommodation has been sought and has been explicitly approved and granted by RMHBC in writing. This is from Senior Director of Family Services, Leslie Louie. The letter was sent to all families Monday and only gives them a few weeks with a January 31st grace period deadline to submit their vaccine passports to RMHBC administration, which usually provides housing to families of sick children in need of regular hospital treatment. Austin Ferguson and his wife Lindsay, who are staying in the Vancouver Ronald McDonald House while their 4-year-old son receives treatment for leukemia, are just 2 of the people who Ronald McDonald House plans to kick out. In a video posted to Facebook, Ferguson confronted a manager in the Vancouver house, demanding answers on why the charity is demanding vaccination when the shot clearly doesn't stop the spread of COVID-19. What we're doing is protecting the safety of everybody in the house, an RMH worker told Ferguson. No, you're not, he replied, because a vaccinated person could still get it and transmit it. Ferguson explained that the family has lived in the facility for months and isn't due to leave until later in 2022. Ferguson asked, you're evicting kids with leukemia, kids who have strokes, kids with Down syndrome. Do you understand how evil this is? This is just so messed up. Well, it's the Canadian way, or the new Canadian way. Here's another similar story. This is from Roberto Wakewell Cruz at the Post-Millennial. A Quebec judge ruled that a father's visitation rights to his 12-year-old child would be temporarily suspended due to his vaccination status. According to Le Devoir, the father's vaccine status, along with conspiratorial views posted to his Facebook, helped the judge make his final decision. It would normally have been in the best interest of the child to have contact with their father, but not in his best interest to have contact with him if he's not vaccinated and is opposed to health measures in the current epidemiological context, the judge ruled. It was the father in this case who initiated a request to the court in mid-December to modify his visitation rights, wanting 1 more day a week with his child during the holidays. The mother opposed it and opted instead to limit his rights after learning that he isn't vaccinated. She said that the father was a conspirator and an anti-vaxxer. The judge notes that while the child is fully vaccinated, the father is not and has reservations about the vaccine. So we can take children away from their parents in Canada because of the parents' political opinions now. In America, this is from Steve Watson at Summit News. MSNBC hack Joy Reid took a break from race baiting Thursday to once again call for anyone who remains unvaccinated to be denied medical care and for them to be made into an underclass. Along with MSNBC medical contributor and apparent Dr. Fauci fangirl, Dr. Lippy Roy, Reid first attacked Senator Ron Paul for again daring to question Anthony Fauci. The pair accused Paul of displaying insane, atrocious vitriol and suggested that the senator, who is a qualified physician, is not really a doctor, reasoning that he does not exude any of the qualities that doctors and nurses possess: empathy, compassion, and a penchant for science and data to drive healthcare policies. Reid claimed that Paul created his own accreditation and didn't get it from like a regular place, so I wouldn't let him operate on me if I was desperate. Now, this statement by Reid is clearly defamatory, as just a cursory glance at Wikipedia would confirm. But of course, defamation law in the United States is such that after the 1964 case, what was it, New York Times versus Sullivan, that you need to show malice. The person needs to know that what he is saying is untrue. Dr. Lippy Roy is wearing a T-shirt on the show which says Fauci in huge letters. That's the kind of outlet that MSNBC is. And in France, again, teachers, come on. If they just keep up the pressure, they can get that 12-month vacation with full pay that they clearly have been striving for so long. This is from Agence France Presse. Huge numbers of French teachers went on strike Thursday, with the biggest teachers union saying half of primary schools were closed as staff demand clarity from the government on coronavirus measures. Coming as France's presidential election campaign gets underway ahead of an April vote, the walkout is awkward for President Emmanuel Macron's government, which has prided itself on keeping schools open to ease pressure on parents through the pandemic. While the Education Ministry said almost 40% of primary school teachers had walked out, top union SUNIPP put the figure at 75%, with one primary school in two closed for the day. The union complains that their members are unable to teach properly, are not adequately protected against coronavirus infection, and frequently hear about changes to health precautions via the media rather than for higher ups. There is some regret. We're starting to get some regret, and hopefully we will get much more. This is from Zero Hedge. In August, Germany's top newspaper, Bild, apologized for the outlet's fear-driven COVID coverage with a special message to children who were told that they were going to murder their grandma. Now a newspaper in Denmark has publicly apologized for reporting government narratives surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic without questioning them. "We failed," reads the article's headline from the tabloid Ekstrabladet, which goes on to admit that, quote, "For almost 2 years, we, the press and the population, have been almost hypnotically preoccupied with the authorities' daily coronavirus figures," unquote. The constant mental alertness has worn out tremendously on all of us. That's why we, the press, must also take stock of our own efforts, and we have failed. We have not been vigilant enough at the Garden Gate when the authorities were required to answer what it actually meant that people are hospitalized with corona and not because of corona, because it makes a difference, a big difference. Exactly, the official hospitalization numbers have been shown to be 27% higher than the actual figure for how many there are in the hospital, simply because they have corona. We only know that now. Of course, it is first and foremost the authorities who are responsible for informing the population. correctly, accurately, and honestly. The figures for how many are sick and died of corona should, for obvious reasons, have been published long ago, so we got the clearest picture of the monster under the bed. Another example, the vaccines are consistently referred to as our super weapon, and our hospitals are called super hospitals. Nevertheless, these super hospitals are apparently maximally pressured, even though almost the entire population is armed with a super weapon. Even children have been vaccinated on a huge scale, which has not been done in our neighboring countries. In other words, there is something here that does not deserve the term super. Whether it's the vaccines, the hospitals, or a mixture of it all, it is every man's bid. But at least the authorities' communication of the population in no way deserves the term super. On the contrary. Oh, and yes, so the truth is finally beginning to leak out. So what to do? We must suppress the truth. But of course, this is from Libby Emmons at the Post Millennial. President Biden gave an update on the whole of government COVID-19 surge response on Thursday morning. Biden begged Americans to wear masks, stating that free masks would soon be available. He pressed vaccines on the unvaccinated, boosters on the vaccinated, and asked social media and media companies not to run stories or allow posts that run counter to government narratives on COVID. Quote, I make a special appeal to social media companies and media outlets to please deal with the misinformation and disinformation that's on your shows. It has to stop. He shook his head in dismay. He said further that COVID-19 is one of the most formidable enemies America has ever faced, and we've got to work together. Yeah. Well, let's just, I guess it's much easier if troublesome truths are suppressed. And, everyone's getting in on this. This is from Maureen Breslin at The Hill. A coalition of doctors and science educators is calling on Spotify to take action against misinformation spread on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Quote, this is from an open letter signed by 270 healthcare professionals. By allowing the propagation of false and societally harmful assertions, Spotify is enabling its hosted media to damage public trust in scientific research and sow doubt in the credibility of data-driven guidance offered by medical professionals. Rogan, 53, has an estimated 11 million listeners and immense influence, according to the letter, which was reported by Rolling Stone. Epidemiologist Katrine Wallace, who signed the letter, told the magazine that she views Rogan as a menace to public health and that his ideas are fringe and not backed in science. Wallace added that having Rogan and his guests on a huge platform makes it seem there are two sides to the issue, and there really are not. The overwhelming evidence is that the vaccine works and is safe. Works at what? Works at what? We were told authoritatively that if we got vaxxed, we wouldn't get COVID-19. That turned out to be untrue. Very much untrue. And now then they shifted. Oh, no. See, it's not really prophylactic. It's actually a palliative. That is not how the vaccines were sold. Not the first jab, not the second jab, not the third jab. And now we're finding out that the ratio is catching up to those who make a claim about its efficacy as a palliative. And if you did this one story from the Washington Post, it just identifies so very much about the mindset of the media. This is from Rachel Pennant. German police used a tracing app to scout criminal witnesses. Some fear that's fuel for COVID conspiracists. Yes, the German government engages in a massive violation of privacy. The worst thing about this story is that it could give fuel to COVID conspiracists. Authorities in Germany are under fire for tracking down witnesses to potential crime by using data from a mobile phone app that was intended to identify close contacts of people infected with the coronavirus. Oh, if we give them this information, the conspiracy theorists said, they're going to use it to track us for all sorts of reasons. You must be crazy, you tinfoil hatter. That is a grossly irresponsible conspiracy theory. Now, it turns out to be true, but the worst part of the revelation is that it makes the conspiracy theorists look good. Police in the city of Mainz near Frankfurt successfully petitioned local health authorities to release data from an app called Luca when a man fell to his death after leaving a restaurant in November. They said they were seeking witnesses who had dined at the restaurant around the same time and reportedly found 21 people from the app data. The apparent misuse of the data has been criticized by privacy advocates who fear that such sensitive information will be used for non-pandemic control purposes. It already has been used. That's the whole point of your story. The incident is also likely to provide fodder for vaccine doubters, some of whom have taken on a broader anti-government stance, and those who believe coronavirus conspiracy theories. This is a conspiracy theory which turns out to be true. But that's not important. Luca is subject to Germany's strict data protection regulations, and by law, information from the app cannot be accessed by non-health authorities and used in criminal prosecutions. The app stores the user's personal details and uses QR codes to record how long they've spent at a location. The information is encrypted to obscure any personal information, according to Culture for Life, the company that developed the app, and can only be decrypted by health authorities if someone at a venue is infected or the police want it. It's encrypted, and we have this information, but only a select group of people can get a hold of it. Does anyone actually believe that? We already have this scandal with a similar thing happening in Canada, which apparently is a non-story, because who needs privacy? Because as we know, in the future, we're not going to have any privacy, and we're not going to own anything, and we're going to like it. Oh, the Financial Times, a very respectable newspaper. This is Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. In a report that advocates governments using psychological operations against their own population, the Financial Times asserts with no proof that Russia and China are responsible for pushing anti-vax sentiment and the criticism of lockdown measures in the West. The article quotes Mikael Torvesen, head of the Swedish Navy's new PsyOps division, who says foreign aggressors are trying to sow division by targeting areas of public concern such as crime, COVID vaccinations, and the government's response to the pandemic and immigration. The most important task in psychological defense is to inoculate the population against believing false information, states the article, which is written by Elizabeth Bra of the American Enterprise Institute, a neocon think tank. Inoculate the population. We're into supervillain territory here. Such measures were deployed in the United Kingdom during the first lockdown when scientists in the UK, working as advisors for the government, admitted using what they now admit to be unethical and totalitarian methods of instilling fear in the population in order to control behavior during the pandemic. One scientist with the SPIB admitted in March 2020 the government was very worried about compliance and they thought people wouldn't want to be locked down. There were discussions about fear being needed to encourage compliance, and decisions were made about how to ramp up that fear. Of course, contrary to the claims made in the FT article, the primary goal of psychological operations, whether directed against an enemy or a domestic population, is to instill fear and change behavior. Telling the truth is hardly a priority. Far from dispelling false information, psychological operations routinely rely on using false information to influence and manipulate the enemy. And in more Suppressio Veri news, this is from Hannah Nightingale at the Post Millennial. America's largest teachers union urged social media companies to suppress opposition to critical race theory. The NEA sent its own letter to social media companies urging them to stop so called propaganda spreading on their platforms against critical race theory, which allegedly stoked, quote, a small but violent group of radicalized parents, unquote. The National Education Association sent its letter on October 8th, around a week after the NSBA sent their letter to the president, setting into motion a chain of events. The NBSA letter was sent on September 29th. On October 4th, the Department of Justice issued a memorandum stating that they would be investigating the threats highlighted in the NSBA's letter. On October 22nd, the NSBA issued an apology for the letter. The NEA letter, penned by President Becky Pringle, urged leaders of Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok to combat viral online trends spreading across their platforms, as well as lies surrounding curriculums. This after the union had come out in favor of critical race theory. And let's see whether there's anything new here at Eugippius. What convinced you containment was a scam? One correspondent responded, I first realized there was something terribly wrong with the containment narrative in March 2020. Ironically, it was quality journalism that made me understand that it wasn't quite right. I read an article by Sarah Napton in The Telegraph, which told me about the controversial history of Professor Neil Ferguson. The claims Napton made were so extraordinary, I immediately began to fact check this and end up writing my first skeptical article titled, Is Epidemiology Useful?, which looked at the role epidemiological modeling played in the British foot and mouth disaster that occurred around the turn of the millennium. After realizing the experts may be quite as expert as they seemed, I waited for Ferguson to publish the source code of the model that had driven the UK and America into lockdown. I'm a software developer and was curious how exactly these models worked. Once it became available, I took a look and was shocked to discover that the problems went well beyond poor quality assumptions. The code was riven with critical bugs that caused it to generate wildly different predictions every time you ran it, depending on things like what type of computer it was executing on and timing differences and how the operating system scheduled work onto the CPU. I read the bug tracker and found the Imperial College team responding to bug reports with completely nonsensical and intellectually dishonest explanations, which prompted me to write an analysis and send it to Toby Young, who published it on Lockdown Skeptics. And let's see what Alex Berenson has to say at his Substack. Supreme Court blocked the OSHA mandate, indeed. COVID infections and deaths soar after the first vaccine dose. COVID vaccines look worse and worse. A reader has pointed out an amazing data set from the province of Alberta, Canada, which reports COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths by day after the first and second vaccine doses. Indeed, infections, hospitalizations, and deaths from COVID all soar in the days and weeks after people receive their first vaccine dose. Alberta has about 4.4 million people, so the sample is not small. The vast majority of vaccines given in the province are the mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna, although about 10% are the DNA AAV vaccines, mostly from AstraZeneca, which is not used in the United States. The figures further support the national level data from Israel and Britain, which last year saw COVID deaths hit all-time highs just after they began mass vaccination campaigns. Vaccine advocates tried to dismiss those deaths as the result of pre-existing winter COVID wave in Britain, although other European countries such as France and Spain did not face similarly large surges. That excuse cannot be used for Alberta. Canada's vaccination campaign began relatively late, and nearly all of it took place after the winter 2020-2021 COVID spike. Through mid-February 2021, barely 2% of Alberta residents had received their first dose. The most likely explanation for the spike was and remains that the first dose of the vaccine transiently suppressed the immune system, as Pfizer's own clinical trial data reveal. But no need to worry, vaccine companies, Berenson concludes. Under the counting rules used by American public health authorities and media outlets, all these deaths and infections are counted and reported as having occurred in unvaccinated people. Yeah, you get the jab, but then you're not vaccinated until 14 days later. Now, why might that be? Because you're susceptible to all sorts of things within that 14-day period. Of course, the news just gets worse and worse and worse, and this explains. This is the explanation for the hysterical and increasingly totalitarian rush to get everyone vaccinated. Got to eliminate the control group. And let's have a look at lockdown skeptics, or dailyskeptic.org, as it's now called. 2 more Downing Street parties come to light. We can't have people getting together. Don't Look Up gets it backwards. Doom mongers making apocalyptic predictions aren't treated with nearly enough skepticism. This is from a column in The Spectator by Toby Young. UK lockdown working as cases plummet. Thank God I listened to Neil Ferguson, says Boris. Boris has a reputation for being exceedingly intelligent. He's certainly ready with a quip. I will give him that. He is often witty, no question. As to how intelligent he is, well, perhaps it has more to do with the fact that he's an exceedingly lazy man. As I mentioned, a year and a half ago, maybe even longer than that. So the UK government gets a model for Imperial College London, where Neil Ferguson resides. Panic stations. This is a catastrophe. So it never occurred to Boris, say, before he started locking down the country, to say, who is this Neil Ferguson chap? Do we know anything about him? Has he made predictions in the past? And how have those predictions turned out? Because if he had said this, to aides who, tell staffers, well, just go on the internet. See what you can find out about Neil Ferguson. They would have run into foot and mouth disease, and they would have said, stay a million miles away from this fellow and his predictions. But Boris, he didn't want to do it. Daily COVID cases fall by nearly 40% in a week. 8th day in a row, cases have fallen week on week. COVID vaccines, 1 death per 8,000 people in Iceland. Serious adverse effects 800-fold higher than with earlier vaccine withdrawn on safety grounds. And moving on. Before I move on, let's have a look at the chat. Controversies says, Cocteau imagines himself up. Oh, okay, we already did that. Let's go down to the bottom here. Come on. But everyone else was locking down, so Boris did it too, said Admiral, but not Sweden. And aren't the Swedes supposed to be ever so, progressive and clever? His great-grandfather was an Ottoman official in Ottoman times, says Red Sulphur Cafe. Indeed. Teleologic Jones, hello, said Biden mumbled through that whole rant and only seemed to be reading with comprehension for a few brief moments. Don Willis, all hands on deck, the cry of these soft, pasty pro-vaxxers. They never had a chance. Hello to Dennis Dale. Nice to hear from you again. What? Weird that PSYOPs are now permitted versus sitting members of Congress. They changed the law in 2014. That's from Quachulango. Emmett Kelly's Earth says, I thought critical race theory was not taught in schools below postgraduate level, so why should the NEA care? Well, I'm pretty sure that they would say that it's not critical race theory that they're objecting to, or that's being objected to, because, of course, critical race theory is not being taught in schools. It's not as if critical race theory has a TM symbol, at the top right, at the end of it, It's not as if critical race theory is proprietary. Dr. Dename says, I knew a guy in Army PSYOPs. They print lame leaflets and drove around in a truck mounted with speakers urging insurgents to surrender. None of it worked. Hello to Sam B., who apparently is about to feast on ham hock and pinto beans. Why does the Swedish Navy need PSYOPs? Asked Dr. Deadname. Good question. Luca fell from the second floor. Never seen her before, says William Hicks. Okay. Yes, that's a reference to a song from the 80s. I'm trying to remember the name. Suzanne Vega. She's Cuban, apparently, or has considerable Cuban ancestry. And I look at her and, she's a natural blonde. And I thought, that can't be true. And I looked it up. Well, it is true. How about that? Red Sulfur says, having roast beef, green beans, and squashed cranberry salad soon. Sounds delish. One of the most formidable enemies America has faced, asked Emmett Kelly's Earth, even worse than the January 6th insurrectionists. Well, if you have a Venn diagram, there's a lot of crossover there, right? A lot of crossover. Okay, so let's talk about a young woman who delights in the name Mackenzie Fierston. Now, I saw this and I thought, this is obviously a made-up name. It has to be a made-up name, that she was called something else and then she changed it to Fierston. Mackenzie, yes. What do they call those NBs now? These names which are chosen because they're deliberately sexually ambiguous. I only learned about NBs yesterday. This is from Jennifer Smith at the Daily Mail. A Rhodes Scholar who won a coveted scholarship at Oxford after claiming she overcame childhood abuse and grew up in foster care has been accused of lying to officials and is in fact the daughter of a radiologist who went to private school. Mackenzie Fierston, 24, describes herself as a, quote, queer, first-generation, low-income, unquote, student at the University of Pennsylvania. She's already in the Ivy League. In 2020, she was given a scholarship to go to Oxford after dazzling the Rhodes Trust with her story of how she overcame welfare, an abusive mother, and the foster care system. But after a November 2020 Philadelphia Inquirer news article about this scholarship lauded her as a first-generation student who has been low income throughout her life and grew up in foster care, an anonymous tipster contacted the Rhodes Trust and UPenn to report her for being blatantly dishonest. They told the schools how Mackenzie, whose previous name was Mackenzie Morrison, went to the $30,000 a year Whitfield private school in St. Louis, Missouri. Her mother is radiologist Dr. Carrie Morrison, and her hobbies at school included horseback riding, skydiving, and whitewater rafting, typically pursuits very popular with the poor: horseback riding, skydiving, whitewater rafting. She spent less than a year in foster care in 2014 after telling police that her mother pushed her downstairs and left her caked in blood. Her mother was arrested for abuse at the time, but the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, something she did not include in her admissions essays. Now she is withdrawn from the Rhodes program, and UPenn is withholding her master's degree pending further investigation. Golly, I wonder what the title of her thesis is. According to an investigation by the Chronicle of Higher Education, the only portion of her story which appeared to be true was that she had one time been in foster care. In 2014, a 17-year-old Mackenzie told police that her mother pushed her downstairs and struck her at their four-bedroom, $750,000 suburban home. Dr. Morrison was arrested at the time, but the case was dropped by prosecutors who said they could never prove Mackenzie's claims. She told police that Mackenzie asked her to pull some gum out of her hair while she was standing at the top of the staircase. Dr. Morrison said that she tried, but that she jerked, fell down 2 stairs, and then sat down. It's unclear exactly what happened next, but she spent 22 days in hospital, then went to live in foster care for less than a year. She continued studying at Whitfield. It's unclear who paid her tuition, and graduated in 2016, shortly before her 19th birthday. Isn't that a year late? She then applied to UPenn with a dramatic admissions essay where she claimed her mother threw her downstairs into a metal table and beat her. Mackenzie stayed with a foster care family, changed her name to Fierceton, then applied for college and was accepted. In a statement to the Chronicle, in light of the scholarship being revoked, Dr. Morrison said of her daughter, Mackenzie is deeply loved by her mom and family. Where's Dad? Our greatest desire is that Mackenzie chooses to live a happy, healthy, honest, and productive life, using her extraordinary gifts for the highest good. I wonder. I wonder what made her crazy. In her application to UPenn, Mackenzie identified an application as queer. I've never been exactly sure what queer means. I've come to the conclusion it means the same as gay, only nastier. At my school, everyone kind of knew me as the foster kid, and all these bad things had happened to. She maintains that she never lied, and the Rhodes Trust is attacking a survivor of abuse in a lawsuit. Oh, yeah. Keep digging, Ms. Fierceton. In a lawsuit filed in December, she accused the UPenn and the Rhodes Trust investigators of victimizing her. Yes, okay. Always a victim. Oh, there she is posing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm going to be talking about Donald Fagan shortly. Donald Fagan does not like modern technology. He's not really fond of technology that was invented, I don't know, after the 1950s, to say. He does not like the internet. He does not like it at all. But young people, the internet is their lives, really. Here's a story by Joseph Pisani and Theo Francis at the Wall Street Journal. These TikTok stars made more money than many of America's top CEOs. Charlie and Dixie D'Amelio, Addison Rae are among TikTok stars who out-earned leaders of many S&P 500 companies. TikTok stars are dancing their way to the bank. Some are making more than America's top chief executives. Charlie D'Amelio, who started posting videos of herself dancing on TikTok in 2019, brought in $17.5 million last year, according to Forbes, which recently ranked the highest earning TikTok stars of 2021. With 133 million followers on TikTok, and I wonder how many of those have been bought. She makes her money from a clothing line and promoting products in TikTok videos and other ads. Influencers, they call them. If you're paid to say that, some clothing is rad or deaf or whatever the kids say, you're a paid endorser. So how do you influence people by being paid to say, kiddies, get your parents to buy this for you? By comparison, median pay for chief executives of S&P 500 companies was $13.4 million in 2020. Yeah, okay. Yeah, how about stock options? Dixie D'Amelio, Charlie's older sister, has about half the TikTok followers of Charlie D'Amelio, but she was the second highest TikTok earner last year, bringing in 10 million. They're really building business empires, says May Karwowski, CEO and founder of influencer marketing agency. Obviously, she noted that many TikTok influencers run new companies, launch brands, and diversify their income streams. Business empires, a business empire that's built on fleeting internet fame. I wonder. The cash flow of TikTok stars has soared along with the app's rapid growth. 7 of TikTok's top earners collectively made $55.5 million last year, a 200% increase from the prior year. TikTok, owned by Beijing-based ByteDance Limited, has hooked people with its secretive algorithm, which delivers video clips that it thinks users would like. The Buzzy app said last year that it had more than 1 billion monthly users. Yes, it's a Chinese spy device, communist Chinese spy device. And at one point, the Trump administration was looking to seize it, but that never happened. Policymakers around the world have been scrutinizing TikTok and its peers, including Meta Platforms Inc., Instagram, over data privacy issues. The possible psychological damage these platforms might cause to younger users is another risk for the company. Recent investigations by the Wall Street Journal found how TikTok's powerful algorithms can hook people and drive minors, among the biggest users of the app, into content about sex and drugs. Yes, and also chopping off your body parts and saying that you're a member of the opposite sex. Their followers are obsessive, said Krishna Subramanian, CEO and co-founder of social media data company Captive 8. Yes, there's no E, there's the numeral 8 at the end. He said TikTok influencers at time have stronger followings than fans of Hollywood stars who tend to be more private. Social media stars give followers a daily taste of life, he said, offering updates on breakups, triumphs, and failures. They're emotionally invested in that creator. Subramanian said, you're more inclined to do or buy things they tell you to buy. Dunkin', the parent of Dunkin' coffee shops and Baskin-Robbins ice cream stores, realized this in 2020 when it named a drink after Charli D'Amelio. It's simply cold brew with caramel and milk, Scott Murphy, the company's president, said. We took an existing product, renamed it after her, and positioned it to appeal to a younger consumer. Dunkin' did not respond to a request for comment. Charli D'Amelio is making the jump from TikTok to TV. She and her family star in The D'Amelio Show, a reality show on Hulu's streaming platform, which has been renewed for a second season. The D'Amelio sisters signed a deal in May with Abercrombie and Fitch Company's Hollister brand to launch clothing brand Social Tourist. Ads for the brand played on the Hulu show and were viewed at 90 million times. The retailer did not respond to request for comment. Another creator making the leap from TikTok is Addison Rae. She made $8.5 million last year. Her earnings put her slightly above. I'm not going to repeat that. Last year, Ms. Rae starred in the Netflix movie He's All That, expanded her makeup line, Item Beauty, and appeared in commercials for clothing brand American Eagle Outfitters. This is scale at work. This is one of the results of scale that we see. I mean, this is not news. That young people are increasingly alienated from their families. They don't have extended families. Edward Luttwak noted, 25 years ago, that cousins have pretty much ceased to exist. And with children being born out of wedlock and divorce, or couples never marrying, grandparents are increasingly, they live somewhere in America. So you see this celebrity compulsion. You care more about people who appear on TV or in movies than you do about people who should be close to you, such as your family and friends. But no, it's true that, say, Jennifer Aniston is not spilling details of her private life every single day on the internet, so you can get that dopamine rush. So yes, let's follow the TikTok influencers. Yes, look at her dancing in her living room. I can relate to that. I suppose you could dance yourself in your living room, but it wouldn't really exist unless it was being filmed and then put up on the internet, would it? We used to laugh. Some of you are old enough to remember this. We used to laugh about Japanese tourists, that the Japanese tourists everywhere in the world seem to regard their vacation, their travels, as meaningless unless all of it could be documented with photographs. They don't seem to be enjoying this. They just seem to be here to take as many pictures as possible. Well, now this is universal. And it's not just people who, traveled long distances. No, it's people who are in their homes. Every aspect of my life must be documented and presented to the whole world. And we can see how this is driving women crazy or crazier, because once again, if young women decide to compare themselves to Addison Rae, a very attractive young woman, they're likely to be depressed. They're not comparing themselves anymore to people who are close in their lives, to family members or schoolmates or people in the office or like that. They're comparing themselves to every other woman in the world, and that can only lead to grief and frequently madness. It's just, I don't know, rich people and their money. It's long been a mystery to me. This is from 3 people at the Mail. Exclusive revealed woman 41 arrested with an England rugby star on suspicion of raping a teenager is a 160 pound an hour prostitute who says player 29 is a client who took the alleged victim to her Manchester flat for a threesome. The England international rugby player 29, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was arrested January the 9th. Sandra Antanya, 41, who admits to being a high-class sex worker, was also arrested at her flat in Manchester. She was held on suspicion of administering a substance with intent to cause a sexual offense. So I'm looking at pictures of this woman. Do you remember 30 Rock? Do you remember when Tracy Morgan would do the drag routine where he'd slap on some lipstick and wear a wig in his Tracy Jordan character? This woman looks, when I say that she looks like Tracy Morgan in a wig and lipstick, she looks exactly like Tracy Morgan in a wig and lipstick. And men are prepared to pay 160 pounds an hour for that. Well, more money than sense, as they say. So a couple more interesting stories from the Daily Mail. Why are today's TV shows and movies so gray? How productions such as Dexter and Gossip Girl went from bright hues to sludge because directors think moody darkness makes them look higher quality. TV shows and movies of recent years have been dimly lit, with viewers complaining about them being too dark. Dexter first aired in 2006 and set in Miami. The coloring of the show reflected bright, vibrant Florida. But its 2020 reboot, Dexter New Blood, was much darker and bluer, with much lower saturation. Critics have branded the phenomenon intangible sludge. Other examples are Gossip Girl, Sabrina, Veronica Mars, Game of Thrones, Jurassic Park, and West Side Story. Well, color correction. Much of what you see in movies and TV shows is not how it was filmed. It is later altered. And I have a hypothesis about this, why this is so dark, and the use of color correction. The Daily Mail says Gina Gonzalez, a co-producer heading up post-production on Station 11, told Vox that hypersaturation is also associated with adverts, and no movie wants to feel like a commercial. Another possible reason is the rise of digital filmmaking, meaning editors can use one-size-fits-all color corrections, which wasn't possible when cinematography was made using film. When using film, color correction is done physically by applying chemicals to negatives in a lab, but now many studios use a look-up table. This is a formula that nearly Will manipulates, again, don't blame me, this is in this story, manipulates the raw footage to match a version of the color palette the studio has agreed to, but this can lead to dull and uniform grading. Aaron Aubuchon, associate professor, film, television, and video production at Webster University, told the Mail, "A part of me notices this trend, especially in certain genres. Horror is my home genre, and in horror, the trend toward muted color palettes is obvious, broadly, but not completely ubiquitous. And it makes sense to me in horror, as horror is often trying to express a certain set of emotions, and muted colors is one strategy." Here's my hypothesis. Lighting films is a tricky business. In fact, it used to be in England that what they call now the director of photography or the cinematographer was called lighting cameraman, because lighting is crucial in a film. And you ever watch shows from the 60s and 70s or soap operas that everything is garishly overlit, that everything looks the same, that the living room Three's Company looks like an operating theater. There's a reason for that. They're not going to do very many setups, as they call them, on a show like that. So this is the permanent lighting, this flat, hard lighting. It's set up, and we going to shoot another scene in the living room. We just turn the lights on. We're not going to adjust anything. And I suspect that this is what's happened to movies and TV shows. Don't worry about the lighting. We'll just use the computer. We'll just turn it up this way or turn it down that way. And so we can get by with fewer and fewer setups, because the more setups you have in a film, the more it costs. Of course, if you're going to do it that way, you've moved a long way from art. But I mean, really, who cares about this? Now, I guess the people who buy, Criterion and Masters of Cinema Blu-rays care about that. But I think that we're a dying breed, really. Because, you look at screens, you can get big screens now, but people are watching stuff on tablets or even on their smartphones. Well, if you're going to be binge watching, 8 episodes of The Office, who cares about the video quality? And there's another story from the Mail by Tom Leonard. Holly Woke, how tyranny of political correctness sweeping Tinseltown is crushing creativity, stifling talent, and driving audiences away. What do spoof Western Blazing Saddles, cross-dressing comedy Tootsie, balking drama Roxy, and The Wizard of Oz have in common? Apart from being hugely successful, much-loved films, no connection may spring to mind, but according to a new expose of the chilling effect wokeness has had on Hollywood, all are now verboten in industry circles. Yes, you got a black sheriff in Blazing Saddles. Dustin Hoffman pretends to be a woman in Tootsie. Rocky's bad guy is black, and The Wizard of Oz hired people with dwarfism to play its munchkins. But haven't we just learned from Baddiel and others that you have to hire people that are the same as the people they're portraying? You wouldn't have an able-bodied person in a wheelchair, like Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot, because Daniel Day-Lewis is not crippled. Okay. Let's go back to the chat before I talk about Donald Fagan. Respectable commenting name says, I think we're at a point where the director of photography is also someone who went to film school, doesn't have an eye, and just really liked movies and has no experience doing anything else. David the Gnome says, also there's a lot of women working in it. Palcasso 88 says, shows in late 60s had garish bright colors because they wanted to sell color TVs. Yeah, this gets even worse when they moved into video filming in the 1970s. I find that almost all of these 1970s shows are simply unwatchable for that reason. If you're watching them in high definition, say, if you were watching them on the blurry, bulgy cathode ray tubes, with indifferent reception, I suppose people could put up with it. But it just, as I say, every so often I'll see that Three's Company or something like that is playing on MeTV, and it's just the sterility and the overlighting. It's sickening to me. Okay. Gloria Miller says, you can't shame me into getting the experimental by calling me unvaccinated any quicker than you can shame me into getting my perfectly healthy right leg cut off by calling it unamputated. Jokin 666 says, Sam Hyde doing his deaf Lothario character. Twin Peaks lighting was dope, says David the Gnome. Respectable commenting name says, I think every aspect of film is now subject to what the writers and directors have been subjected to for a few decades, institutional incest and stagnation. At least it's not the blue and orange paradigm that was everywhere in the late 00s. Pitsky says, hello, Pitsky. She is 14, paused by left to schools and shrinks on meds. Damage is done. I failed. Only God can help her now. We're in Hail Mary mode now. I'm very sorry to hear that. Krispy Kreme or Dunkin'? I don't understand. Dunkin' Donuts. Did everyone do that name? Oh, we're not Dunkin' Donuts. That's just too much for people to understand. So we're just dunking now. Of course, that has a long history in America. Social security number became your social. Heavy metal became metal. There are many, many such examples. You want to bring that down to one word, to ram it home. G. Gordon, original based alpha, great radio show. I was quite fond of his radio show. He was so very polite, you know. Uh, Donald, let's move into discussing Donald Fagan here. He still holds a grudge against G. Gordon Liddy, very much so. G. Gordon Liddy was the DA of Dutchess County in upstate New York, and he organized a drug raid on Bard College, where Walter Fagan was studying, and he got swooped up in the net. There were no charges, or charges were quashed against him. We discovered that when he was passing through the border to play a show in Vancouver, a Canadian customs officer said there's an FBI file on you, and supposedly you were arrested for selling pot. And he said that, this had happened 40 years earlier, and he didn't know anything about it until that day. They wrote a song about that called My Old School on their second record. I'll just mention that, Che Blutarsky says, what are the odds that Donald Fagan would be associated with multiple famous people while still in college? Becker, Chevy Chase, and G. Gordon Liddy. Yes. When Becker and Fagan were playing in the rhythm section of the popular 60s band Jay and the Americans, was it Jay Black, leader of the band, called them Manson and Starkweather. Yes, Starkweather being the killer who was immortalized by Martin Sheen in that movie, Badlands. Now, of course, I just think maybe that had something to do with the Steely Dan song from the Royal Scam called Don't Take Me Alive. I think it might have. So I read Fagan's, quasi-memoir called Eminent Hipsters. It's a curious book because what it is, it begins with a collection of pieces on various musicians that he wrote for the now defunct magazine Premier, which I enjoyed at the time. Fagan had a very long streak where apparently he was, unable to write music. So it was suggested that how about you pen some pieces about film music, and he did. And I don't know, they're quite enjoyable. He talks about, for instance, Henry Mancini. That he loved Henry Mancini, and then he tended to deprecate him in his later years as being, how would I put it, like hollowed out jazz. He takes a shot at Burt Bacharach in that hollowed out soul. I don't know. I wish that he'd made it clear. I hope he doesn't think that way about Burt Bacharach, because Burt Bacharach was, one of the great pop geniuses of the 20th century. He writes about his young fascination with science fiction, and he mentions how Scientology grew out of the science fiction community, John W. Campbell and the like. And so many of them at the top of the fraternity fervently believed in Dianetics, that it was going to save the world and end wars and such like. And I don't know, how much time would you have to spend around L. Ron Hubbard to know that he was an utter fraud? I shouldn't think it would take very long. But of course, those were the days when people communicated mostly by letter, because even long distance phone calls were prohibitively expensive. He writes about Gene Shepherd. And Gene Shepherd was a radio star from Chicago. And there was a cult, a Gene Shepherd cult. People know him for a collection of his stuff that was put together, Bob Clark's movie, A Christmas Story. But Fagan admired Gene Shepherd as a genius of the radio, a genius improviser, a man with a subversive mind. I don't know whether you know this or not, but Gene Shepherd had a fan who used to call up his show, and her name was Lois Nettleton. And it turned out that Lois Nettleton was an actress, or an aspiring actress, and a very attractive woman. And they got married. The marriage did not work out, and I do not believe there were any children. If you have watched 50s, 60s, 70s TV, you have seen Lois Nettleton. In fact, she appeared in an episode of Seinfeld, the one where George gets in trouble because his girlfriend's mother, played by Lois Nettleton, sees him taking food out of the garbage. It was an eclair or something like that. And George is arguing to Jerry that it was still on the doily, it was adjacent to garbage. And Jerry says, adjacent to garbage is garbage. Interestingly, Fagan reports how he soured on Shepherd. He writes, Shepherd increasingly exhibited the whole range of symptoms common to the aging diva. He became paranoid and resentful of imagined rivals, whether they were old ones like Mort Sahl or upstarts like Garrison Keillor. At the same time, he disavowed all his radio work, claiming that it was just a temporary gig on his way to some fanciful glory on the stage and screen. He even seemed to want to kill off his childhood, insisting that all those stories and characters were pulled clear out of his imagination. Old fans, from whom he had been almost like a surrogate father or big brother, were often met with derision when they approached him. Let's see. Megalomaniac. But of course, in the second half of the book, which is a tour diary, he admits that having to be, traveling, being on the road, and being a performing monkey, I believe is the term that he used, tends to turn people into megalomaniacs. Fagan grew up in suburbia, but he didn't move to suburbia. His parents didn't leave New York for New Jersey until he was 7. And he apparently, Donald Fagan never got over this, or so he claims. And then, having established a kind of community with extended family in one part of New Jersey, they moved to the Plains, where there was no one that they knew. Eventually, after he left home, they moved to Ohio, I think first Dayton and then Cleveland, where his father, who was not a very good businessman, had an opportunity to get in, not quite, but almost at the ground floor of McDonald's in terms of franchises, but instead he chose a chain called Burger Chef, which disappeared a long time ago. He writes, like most of the finer things in life, jazz is an acquired taste. Yeah, Donald Fagan is, associated with bop, hard bop, East Coast jazz, which I simply have not liked at all. These modal jams, this infernal tootling, I really can't bear it. It just seems like I regard it as a sterile intellectual exercise. I have always preferred West Coast jazz. I mean, to the extent that I listen to jazz, which isn't a lot. But you see, I mean, Fagan name-checked Dave Brubeck on his big solo hit from his first solo album, The Night Fly. And you hear him in this talking about listening to, West Coast jazz, along with Stravinsky, neoclassical Stravinsky. You would think that Fagan, kind of a problem with Stravinsky, because Stravinsky was a right-winger and he was a religious man, whereas I don't know that I would say that Fagin is a left winger. He has a reflexive hatred of Republicans, of whom there are an awful lot in the United States. And Fagin is a God hater, like Kingsley Amis was. It's not that this is all nonsense. It's like, take that, God. I'll show you. Yeah, he wrote a song called God Whacker, which is about actually killing God. The second half of this book is quite revealing of Fagin, and not in a way that reflects well on him. But Fagin is a highly intelligent man, so obviously he would know that. You know, it's one thing to tour when one is young, and obviously when you get into your mid-60s, it's a different thing. It's a different thing altogether. Fagin, shares with us some of his medical problems, but he just hates touring, and he's always hated touring. Steely Dan toured. Their first record came out in 1972, and they had 2 hits, and they toured, and he thought that it was just terrible, and the sound was always terrible. I have a bootleg of Steely Dan, the original band, augmented with a second drummer, Jeff Porcaro, and was Royce Jones on vocals and Michael McDonald on keyboards and vocals from the Rainbow Theatre in London in 1974. And it sounds pretty good to me, but no, he didn't like doing it. Fagin doesn't like playing outside of New York City because he misses his wife, and there's a travel, but he also doesn't like playing in New York City because, well, all these people who know you come to your concerts, and so there's the extra pressure, and you don't want to disappoint them, or you're resentful because of the extra pressure. But to give you an idea, he was playing a tour, the Dukes of September, Boz Scaggs and Michael McDonald, and so he was carrying 1/3 of the load. They were, they did some of their own hits, but they did other music that they liked, soul music. And he reports that someone yells a foul word when he starts playing What I Say by Ray Charles, and he says, I don't know, this guy wasn't expecting Ray Charles, so I suppose it's reasonable enough. I don't know why you would go to a Donald Fagin concert if you were going to be offended by hearing a Ray Charles song. Who doesn't like Ray Charles? I mean, come on. But anyway, to give you an idea of what he thinks about being on the road, or I don't know, America, flyover country generally, although he's just as acerbic about the West Coast. Food is primarily room service, which always involves an awkward phone call with a poor effer who's been programmed to respond to everything you say with a perky absolutely, and who's sworn to repeat your order to you no matter how simple. Then there's the dance with the waiter who's determined to get that cart in the door without you holding it open, and who also says absolutely a lot. For some years, it's been my feeling that the mechanized, brainless routines of many service people must have started with a cult-owned business, perhaps a restaurant chain operated by some sort of dead-eyed Christo-fascists or Moonies or Orange people. It's that Sarah Palin talk. Here's your prime rib for you. Absolutely. I have to give Donald Fagin credit for this, really, because I'm sure a lot of people read this thinking that Donald Fagin is a very nasty man. But so why are the conditions not optimal? Well, he has a lot of testy communication with his manager, the famous Irving Azoff, and he keeps explaining to him, if you were touring with Steely Dan, things would be a lot different, but you're not touring with Steely Dan. So, I mean, what do you expect? He likes this term TV babies. He uses it a lot. And he is of the opinion that television and what followed ruined America. I'm in town with this band, the Dukes of September Rhythm Review, which is Michael McDonald, Boz Skaggs, and me performing a program of moldy old R&B and soul tunes that we like, with some of our own hits thrown in to keep the TV babies happy. And yes, yes, TV babies. There it is. Most of what they play is unfamiliar to the TV babies. Back from the show, basically fine, but we have to change the encore tunes. Mike singing Wilson Pickett's In the Midnight Hour, which would have been a sure thing 40 years ago, was, as Mike himself said afterwards, a death march. The TV babies have never heard it, or could care less, or maybe it was just too on the nose. He uses this year, he talks about people born after 1961 or something, TV babies. Well, I don't know. I was born in 1955 and I was a TV baby, certainly. I know Wilson Pickett's In the Midnight Hour very well, and I love it. And people who grew up listening to radio in the 1960s or even the 1970s would know In the Midnight Hour. I have to assume that it's a song that's played frequently on oldies radio stations. By the way, I'm not posting this journal on the internet. Why should I let you lazy, spoiled TV babies read it for nothing in the same way you download all those songs my partner and I sacrificed our entire youth to write and record? Not to mention the miserable, friendless childhoods we endured that left us with lifelong feelings of shame and self-reproach. We were forced to countervail with a fragile grandiosity and a need to constantly prove our self-worth. In short, with the sort of personality disorders that ultimately turned us into performing monkeys. He writes, incidentally, by TV babies, I mean people who were born after, say, 1960, when television truly became the robot caretaker of American children and therefore the principal architect of their souls. I've actually borrowed the term from the film Drugstore Cowboy, in which Matt Dillon, playing a drug addict and dealer, uses it to refer to a younger generation of particularly stupid and vicious dealers who seem to have no souls at all. Donald Fagen is not happy with MP3s. He's not happy with earbuds, or as he says, crappy little computer speakers at all. I know what he's talking about here. Music is meant to be felt, not just heard, but the whole body. It's a full body experience, and it's meant to come out of speakers of some size, often considerable size, with actual stereo separation. Music is not meant to be heard on headphones, or especially with those little buds. So I'm with Donald Fagen on this, but again, I suppose this has something to do with my age, or that he's just not that much older than I am. He does not like hippies. I was associate in Northern California with the late 60s, where I spent some time here. The hippie stuff was fun for about 5 minutes, and then by late 1967, the barbarism had set in. A typical story. A woman I know made the mistake of accepting the invitation of a famous hippie songwriter to spend the day on his houseboat in Mendocino, where he proceeded to beat the hell out of her and for a time kept her there at gunpoint. Luckily, she escaped and told her friend Sonny Barger, then president of the Oakland Hells Angels, about it. Sonny sent a crew roaring upstate, where they worked the guy over and burned down his boat. In those days of love and peace, you'd hear that sort of stuff all the time. I don't know. I mean, this tour diary have a useful purpose. I'm trying to think of the name of the producer, the fellow who did the second Nirvana record, In Utero. I'll come up with it here. Famous, indie producer, Steve Albini. He wrote a famous essay. Oh, so you want to be a rock and roll star? I don't even know whether it was called that. And then he looks at what you're likely to earn in the music business, and you'd be better off, working behind the counter at 7-Eleven. He actually, gives the figures. Now, as far as Donald Fagen's tour diary goes, it must be so glamorous, being on the road and playing to all your fans in all these different cities. Well, when you go to concerts, a lot of the people there are not necessarily your fans. I don't know, you know, some boy likes it, so the girl tags along, or some girl likes it and the boy tags along, or, oh, apparently this is the thing we're supposed to be interested in, and oh, well, there's a rush for tickets. I don't want to be left out, that sort of thing. I'm a big Steely Dan fan, right from the very beginning. I loved their first album. It was a very strange band, because you had this fellow David Palmer, who was the lead singer of the band, who was brought in because the record company demanded it, because Donald Fagen's voice was supposedly not good enough. But then they have two AM hits, and it's Donald Fagen singing them. And of course, Palmer, you've seen them on the Midnight Special. You see David Palmer, and if Donald Fagen is singing, what's he going to do? You look like an idiot standing there on stage. When you're not singing or you're not playing. It's just so awkward. And even the drummer sang a song on the first album. So they get rid of David Palmer, and their second record comes out. And I love it. I love it to death. It was not a big hit at all. No hits from it. And yeah, when you're singing about Kathy Barbarian, even one lad that Kathy Barbarian can't sing, a little recondite, perhaps, for the audience. That was Countdown to Ecstasy. So let's make it simpler. And Pretzel Logic, of course, has Ricky Don't Lose That Number on it. And I love that record. I mean, I think in terms of integrating Fagen and Becker's jazz boat noodling predilection with rock music, perhaps it's the best example. I mean, you got a Duke Ellington number on there. You got a song called Parker's Band about Charlie Parker. I like the tension in the early Steely Dan records. That, yeah, we're jazz guys, but jazz doesn't sell, so we're going to have to be pop guys. So there's this tension, thesis, antithesis, which leads to synthesis. And of course, you see this with lots of other bands. You see it in the Rolling Stones. Oh, they wanted to be bluesmen, but no, it's got to be pop. You see it in Roxy Music again. Oh, Brian Ferry wants to be like Sam Cooke, but no, you got to be more pop. And so there's this tension in their early records. My favorite Steely Dan record is their fourth one, and I don't know, perhaps came out in 1975. It is called Katie Lied. It is one of the saddest records ever made. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that I love it so much. And I guess this is the first appearance of Michael McDonald on a Steely Dan record. And wow, he helps these songs, these productions so much. The penultimate tune on the record is called Any World That I'm Welcome To. And the sadness just becomes overwhelming at that point. And Michael McDonald really adding to that. Of course, the last song, Throw Back the Little Ones, has a great line, great line of advice. Hot licks and rhetoric don't count much for nothing. Be glad if you can use what you borrow. The Royal Scam, 1976. You've got Larry Carlton all over that record, really rocking it up. A song like Don't Take Me Alive, say. But you see the songs getting longer. You see the songs getting considerably longer here, which I think was a warning sign. But this is a real guitar album, like on Haitian Divorce, Dean Parks, Talk Box stuff, just outstanding. Outstanding. And then you get to Asia, and I like Asia a lot, but Jazzbo noodling has really taken over. let's see, how long are the songs? 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. A lot of stretching out there. And I think that stretching out is rather, inimitable to popular music. But of course, it was the most successful record. And, songs like Peg and Josie, they seem to be far less acerbic, than, I don't know, a song like What Any Major Dude Could Tell You, right? Which is a really kind of savage put down of a pretentious woman. And Gaucho, which is the last record made by the, Steely Dan, the first version of it before they packed it in, largely due to Walter Becker's drug problems. It was recorded in New York, which was a mistake. It took forever to record, and the songs are long, 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 long. Of course, there's always great stuff on Steely Dan records. Hey 19, Babylon Sisters, Time Out of Mind. And then they disappeared and came back a long time later. And I suppose what was most strange about this, 20 years later, was how successful Two Against Nature was. The follow-up of original tunes, the last album, Everything Must Go, not so successful. The reason that Donald Fagen, has to go on these tours, not Steely Dan, or did have to, is that he needed the money. He needed the money because Steely Dan didn't put out all that many records. They spent so much money in the studio that one wonders how much they actually made from their records. Some people have done covers of Fagen and Becker songs. There are not that many covers of them. And of course, they didn't tour. So one needs the money. Let's have a look at the chat before I talk about Jean Cocteau. Also, back in the day, DanFest concert pre-parties with other like-minded folks, priceless, says Don Willis. Under the Banyan Tree is the site for true fans. Guitar solo on Ricky Don't Lose That Number is sublime, says Jay Blutarsky. Indeed. Of course, Steely Dan is associated with studio perfectionism. And, there's a debate about this. I mean, how perfect do you want popular music to be? Well, on one of the classic albums, documentary about Asia, I think it's Rick Marotta, the drummer, saying that, if you had, two clubs for hands and you had, clubs for feet, then that was acceptable for being a drummer at the time. And he talks about how he used to open his hi-hat just a little bit for the sound, and he never heard it on a record until a Steely Dan record. The studio perfectionism, I mean, it really pays off. Ian Durham says, Becker, Fagen jazz influence, they talk about hard bop, but their music doesn't sound anything like it. Steely Dan had a uniquely complex chordal vocabulary for pop music to go along with the hipster irony. The Mu major chord, yes. Famous Mu major chord, says Don Willis. They used to sell high-end stereos by playing Steely Dan, gold standard, Don Willis. Now, I don't know that, the nostalgia kicking in here, but, you'd leave home, right? And you go to university or get a job, as I did. And then you'd save up money for a stereo system. And I built one. Heath was the name of the company, an English company, the Heath Kit. It was very powerful. It was 100 watts and very sophisticated for the time, very high quality. I had tower speakers. I had a dual 801 direct drive turntable with a Shure a V15 Type 3 cartridge. And I mean, the first time, I set this system up, I had to take it back because I'd made a few soldering errors. And I got the thing set up, and the first record that I played was For Your Pleasure by Roxy Music, and I was just stunned at how it sounded. Just absolutely stunned. And I don't know. I mean, we were talking about, the cheap effects, the mush sludge in movies. Well, obviously, you're going to see this in popular music now, because if people are listening to it on equipment that can't handle the subtleties, why would you want the subtleties? Hmm? No, but the stereo system and putting together the stereo system, that was a real rite of passage for a young man. Like today, I am a man. It really was like that. Bernard, pretty purdy. Don Willis notes. What a likable guy he is. He's really proud of what he's done, but why shouldn't he be proud of what he's done? He put up these signs on either side of his drum kit. You done it. Next sign. You hired the hit maker. Bernard, pretty purdy. Wayne Shorter, not bad either, says Ian Durham. Indeed. Wolf Barney says, for your pleasure, Brian Eno, Brian Ferry together, Roxy Music at their best. Media Hit says KMG back in plaid. Michael McDonald doesn't ever sing a complete word in Peg. Yes, it goes into the exceedingly close harmonies that Michael McDonald sings on that song in the classic albums, Doc. Rick Beato considers the guitar solo from Larry Carlton and Kid Charlemagne his favorite. Oh, I love Larry Carlton, There's a whole bunch of videos about "Don't Take Me Alive" and Larry Carlton's guitar playing, because the modulations are very unusual. Apparently, a lot of people, or a fair number of people, are willing to watch videos and spend hours trying to figure out something that Larry Carlton, probably improvised in the studio. I've never heard a Steely Dan song, says David the Gnome. Really? That sounds odd. I wear earbuds on the bus to keep weirdos from talking to me, says Palcasso 88. Drugstore Cowboy had great lighting, I said David the Gnome. The Dukes are cool. Who's that lady? 5-star. Okay. They've been singing. They've been doing a lot of touring work with Steve Winwood. Touring with Steve Winwood and Steve Winwood singing with the band. I guess if you got Steve Winwood singing, you don't have to worry about having a good lead singer, right? Pretzel Logic. Yeah, I've seen him. I've seen videos of him singing lead on that. Ian Durham says, last live concert I attended was Larry Carlton. He said that the only solo he felt obligated to do note for note was the Kid Charlemagne one. Don Phillips says, I'm just relieved that KMG did not fail me. It was going to be a deal breaker. Sweet. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, let's talk about, well, I'm running late here, and I guess I should have known that that was going to happen. But nonetheless, I am going to talk about Jean Cocteau's 1946 film La Belle et la Bête, or Beauty and the Beast, and which has been Disneyfied over and over and over again. Now, there's some controversy about this, what I'm going to say here, this quotation. Stanley Kubrick was very fond of it, that, if you're an artist, what do you do? You're a filmmaker. You want to be a great filmmaker. What do you do? Well, it is said that Serge Diaghilev told Jean Cocteau, who was writing a libretto for one of his ballets, astonish me. That's very good advice for an artist. And this is what Jean Cocteau sought to do in his work. And La Belle et la Bête is one of the most astonishing artistic productions that has ever been created. It is a unique and singular world of fantasy and myth. First, something about Jean Cocteau. He was born in 1889 and he died in 1963. He was rather at the heart of avant-garde French art for, well, the 20th century. He was a poet, a playwright. He wrote novels. He made many famous films. He was a journalist as well. And he was associated with Les Six and, the out there crowd like André Gide. He wrote for the ballet, as mentioned previously. He knew everybody. He knew everybody who was anybody. And I don't know. He had a talent for being adopted by rich people, by influential people. And I have not talked about, I hope to, his film Orpheus, or his Orphic trilogy. He wrote opera libretti, La Voix Humaine, The Human Voice, which is a very strange, radical kind of opera involving the telephone, was set to music by Francis Poulenc. And one of the things I'll say about this Beauty, La Belle et la Bête from the start is that Jean Cocteau was very much an auteur. In fact, the movie begins very charmingly with Cocteau with a piece of chalk in his hand, in one hand, and a cloth in the other, and he's in front of a rather distressed blackboard, and he writes out all the credits, or the important credits, handwrites them in chalk, and then erases them and move on to the next one. And this is a film written and directed by Jean Cocteau. Everything about this film is absolutely superlative. The music by Georges Auric. Now, Philip Glass has done an alternative score. Philip Glass actually wrote an opera based on Beauty and the Beast. I have not yet had the opportunity to hear his alternate version of the score, but the score by Auric is outstanding. If you look at the costume design, the photography, the lighting, the editing, and there were some technical challenges involved in this film. So we have, executive producer involved, and this is a Gothic film. I mean, it's very much a pagan film. There are many such One Touch of Venus examples, eruption of paganism in a modern Christian world. But think Gustave Doré, if you're familiar with his illustrations of Dante and the Bible and such like. I don't know. Doré used to be extraordinarily popular. I don't know how popular he is now. The DP was Henri Lequin, a production designed by Christian Bérard and Lucien Carré. And there's not much, of course. Well, let's talk about the source material. Beauty and the Beast is a fairy tale, which dates back to 1740. The version that Cocteau based his film on came from 1756 by Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont. And you can see obvious connections with the fairy tale of Cinderella, say, obvious similarities, and many other such examples. It is about a woman called Belle, the beauty of the title, who lives a distressed life. She is oppressed by her two sisters, who are considerably less attractive than she is. And there is a brother, Ludovic, who is a ne'er-do-well. And Ludovic has a friend who is, well, a crony. They like to drink and gamble. And he is called Avenant, and who has a great passion for Belle, who is played by Josette Day. And Belle loves her father, and her father was a rich man involved in the shipping business, and 3 of his ships bearing cargo have gone missing on the high seas, and the father is ruined. The son, Ludovic, very foolishly signs a deal with a usurer, such that if payment is not made by a certain time, then all of the possessions of the family's home will be taken. Now, there is good news at the beginning, because it seems that one of the ships has come through, its cargo intact, but the father does not get to the port in time, and the creditors have been there first, and so they get all of the money. And the father lapses into sickness. It's a very grim situation. Of course, there's a kind of a humor here, just the nastiness of the 2 sisters with the, yes, Felicity and Adelaide. They are just constantly scheming. I mean, it's almost camp in a way, just how nasty they are. But they always believe that they are going to triumph, that they're going to find rich husbands or such like, or they're going to use some sort of scheme to turn around the financial situation of the family. So the father finds himself riding through a forest at night. I mentioned the lighting and photography of this film. I mean, it is highly stylized and rather artificial, but also realistic at the same time. A great many real locations throughout France, in various parts of France, were used in this film. And of course, these aren't sets. I mean, you'd have to be mad to build these as sets. The tremendous, stone stairways and the like, and of course, the amount of work that would be necessary to give the impression of, a chateau, that is run down, covered with leaves and all the rest of it. You know, so you have this commingling of the real and the artificial. Obviously, there is no CGI in this movie. It is all practical effects. The practical effects are not used in order to see what we can do. The practical effects are used in an attempt to incite or foment, if you will, astonishment, and they do. The father complains that he will get lost in the dark forest, and instead he stumbles on what appears to be a deserted castle. And I don't know, he's looking for lodging for the night. He's looking for to stay out of. There's a storm coming, a thunderstorm, to avoid being soaked to the skin or die of hypothermia. So he walks to the front of the to the chateau, and the door to the stable opens by itself, and the horse walks in, and then the door shut by themselves. So he walks up the long stairs to the front entrance of the chateau, and the doors open by themselves. And then we are astonished to see down the foyer all these candelabra, and they were being held by human arms. We also notice that we have these sculptures, these relief sculptures throughout this castle, only they have human heads, or eyes that can open, eyes that can see, heads that can turn. It's all very, as the Russians say, ostra nenye. You know, it is. It is really working, wonders on what we believe to be, real, with the real world. And we see a banquet laid out. There is no one there. The father calls out, and there is no answer. So he sits down, and again, an arm comes out of nowhere from the table and lifts a pitcher full of wine and gives him a tall glass of this. The father drinks the wine and then falls asleep. And then he wakes up and he decides to leave. Now, before he had left, he asked his children if they wanted anything, from the journey, because the assumption was that he was going to return as a rich man. And so the two ugly sisters ask for, jewels, pearls, a parrot, monkey, whatever. And Belle asks for a rose. And on his way out the grounds of the castle, the father reaches up. He's wearing gloves. And he snaps off a rose, whereupon a monster appears. This is La Bête, the beast. And it is an absolute triumph of costuming and makeup. I could tell you how many hours it took. That's not really important. There's kind of a game there that you see in discussions of films of this sort. Oh, well, yes, so-and-so had to sit in a makeup chair for X numbers of hours. And the person who has to sit in the makeup chair for the longest number of hours is obviously the winner. Suffice to say that this is a totally realistic looking costume of a man. Well, he resembles a giant cat, I suppose one could say, but not in a bad way, like that recent movie, Cats. No, 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 no. He is quite formidable. He explains to the father that you have done the one thing that you shouldn't have done, to steal one of my roses, and so you were condemned to death. And but if you can find someone, such as, say, your daughter, Belle, to take your place, then I will spare you. And so he returns to his house, and Belle, she loves her father so much that she volunteers to go to the beast's chateau. And right from the very beginning, I mean, we see this repulsion and attraction working in almost equal measure. That even before she has seen the beast, she seems to be, how would you say, erotically attracted to him. And there's some funny business with her playing with a knife. I'll just leave it at that. But the beast is, how does the beast survive? Well, we're not really shown. We see a doe, a young doe with its throat slit. We see him appear from time to time with his shirt is torn and is covered in blood. Presumably, he is feasting on animals on the grounds, or perhaps, I don't know, perhaps a man who is foolish enough to enter it. He's rather ashamed of this. Everything we see smoke. There's such a use of smoke. It's just the smoke from the candles, but the smoke from his fingers. Just this air of mystery. When Belle enters the chateau for the first time, it's filmed in slow motion, and it is a breathtaking effect. And later we see her actually gliding along the floor, that she is in such a different world. Now, the beast, he wants to marry Belle. And he says, I will see you only once a day at 7:00 every evening at the supper table. And I will ask you this same question: will you be my wife? And she says no and no and no and no. We see her. She was, her sisters had all the finery back at the family home, but she is now dressed as a queen, dressed, as she says later, by invisible hands. And we see this array of absolutely fantastic gowns and jewelry and headdresses and diaphanous scarves and the like. It is really breathtaking. Now, meanwhile, back at the house, where is Belle? What has happened to Belle? And Belle wants to see her father. She has access to a mirror, a magic mirror that the beast has given her, where she can see across vast distances, and she sees that her father is close to death. And so she wants to visit him, and she asks the beast, and reluctantly, he says that you can visit for a week, but you must come back, or I will die of love. And she appears, and the her sisters and her brother and her brother's friend Avenant decide that this is a tremendous opportunity again to become rich, because there is a pavilion which is lit from within, and you can see it from outside through the roof, through the glass roof, which is full of treasure. And the beast has entrusted Belle with a golden key to it. He also gives her a glove, which gives her the power of transmogrification. Now, of course, if you're looking for logic in fairy tales, you're going to find holes there. There's a special horse called Magnifique. And why this horse would be needed to ferry people back and forth, if this glove gives the power of transmogrification, it's not addressed. But, this is a film about mood more than anything else. Again, if you're looking for films with lots and lots of plot, don't watch this. Because, as I say, it is about mood, it is about feeling, it is about experiencing wonder. That's what La Belle and La Bête is about. So the gang, as it were, comes up with a scheme, well, to kill the beast and to steal his treasure. And it doesn't work. But we find out that this pavilion is actually a temple to the Roman goddess Diana. And they are armed with bows, but Diana, the huntress, is armed with a bow as well. Belle is distraught that she has broken her promise to the beast, and she discovers him dying on the grounds. But then there is another transmogrification, and the beast becomes something very different, although very familiar as well. There's a curious scene near the end of the film where the beast is explaining how he became a beast, that it was lack of love that had turned him into a beast. And Belle seems to be rather ambivalent about the situation in which she has found herself in. But she is told that, I will take you and we will fly through the skies. And the effect, which is a very simple effect, actually, obviously filmed, running film backwards and superimposed on pictures of the clouds. It is absolutely breathtaking, just breathtaking. And it is rare that one sees a film that takes one into a unique and singular world, that casts a spell over one. This is one such film. And if you love film, you will love you will love this. I suspect, that if you love fairy tales, if you love this sense of childish wonder, this is how Cocteau begins the movie. Children believe what we tell them. They have complete faith in us. They believe that a rose plucked from a garden can plunge a family into conflict. They believe that the hands of a human beast will smoke when he slays a victim, and that this will cause him shame when a young maiden takes up residence in his home. They believe 1,000 other things. I ask of you a little of this childlike sympathy, and to bring us luck, let me speak 4 truly magic words: childhood's open sesame, once upon a time. Now, the Belle et Bête has been available from Criterion for about 10 years now on Blu-ray, on what they call a stacked edition, I think with 2 commentaries and the alternate Philip Glass score and all sorts of other great stuff. The British Film Institute brought out a version, 4 years ago now, which was supposed to be an upgrade, but the transfer was botched. So you ended up with all these artifacts. I did some research on this. The BFI said that they were going to be sending out replacement Blu-rays, and presumably, if you bought it originally, you would not get the botched transfer. But the last story I have on this is from September 2018. And when I went to Amazon Co. UK, I could not find any indication that BFI had, in fact, fixed the problem. So in this regard, unless you have access to information that is unknown to me, probably best to stick to the Criterion version. It's in black and white. Cocteau wanted to do it in color. This was 1946, shortly after the war ended, and there simply wasn't enough money. One can only imagine how gorgeous this would have looked in color, but it looks gorgeous in black and white. And there is an advantage there that the film was restored a few years ago, and the fact that it's in black and white means that it was much easier to restore than a color version would have been. Film stock, color film stock just becomes a nightmare if it is left alone for any long period of time. Everything bleeds together, and you get this horrible, blanched look. But the restoration, this is a movie from 1946, 75 years ago, and there are a few problems with the transfer, at least in the Criterion version. You get some fading, you get a little juddering, but I have to say, for the most part, it looks fine. It looks fine. So those are my thoughts on La Belle et la Bête. Let's take a final look at the chat. Media Hit says Murnau's Sunrise is on YouTube. Sunrise is my 3rd favorite film. Yes, it's my 3rd favorite. It's been available on an outstanding Fox Blu-ray for quite some time. One more thing about Beauty and the Beast. If you're going to watch this, watch it on a big screen, the biggest screen that you can. Because if you watch it on a smaller screen, even something like a 28-inch computer screen, you're not going to be getting the full effect. It's like watching 2001 on a small screen. Because what's the fuss all about? Well, if a movie is based largely on visual qualities, then you want the best visual representation that you can get. Hello to Oscar Toe. I love mood and fairy tales, he says. Meatloaf must have been watching Beauty and the Beast when he made his video for I Would Do Anything for Love, says Media Hits. Oscar Toe says it also shows the power of women, certainly good women whose womanly intuition sees beyond appearances into the heart of others. Also from Oscar Toe, Belle's love for her father makes the story for me. What are we talking about here? Oh, we're talking about Depeche Mode, are we? I like Cocteau's version of Beauty and the Beast better than the TV show with Ron Perlman. Well, Beauty and the Beast is a very economical 90 minutes. It's got that. On tonight's episode of Beauty and the Beast. I mean, how long could you play that out for? You know? Don Willis, thank you for your kind words. Oh, Yellow. I love Yellow. Love Yellow. Media Hit says, I've been listening to Yellow's 1985 commercial breakout, Stella. Now it's time to listen to their earlier experimental electronic stuff. Again, they were rougher in the beginning, and maybe I like that best. I would say my favorite Yellow record would be You Gotta Say Yes to Another Excess. No, Kevin, is one of the 50 films you call your third favorite film. No, I have a list. And this is definitive, that my favorite film is A Clockwork Orange. My second favorite film is Al Balthazar, and my third is Sunrise. Media Head says Netflix DVD has Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast. Anyway, that's it for today. I'm going to be talking about film again tomorrow, when I am going to discuss Joseph McBride's biography of Billy Wilder. So what's coming up culture-wise besides that? On January 20th, Theater Thursday next week, I'm going to be talking about John Patrick Shanley's film from 2008, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep, called Doubt. And we've talked about the book club. On Music Monday, I'm going to be talking about one of my very favorite people in the whole world, and has been for decades. His name is Peter Blegvad, and he is a musician, a songwriter, and a visual artist of considerable talents. So I'll be back on the air at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.